The sand burned beneath her feet, coarse and hot like the breath of the dying sun. Kayla stood at the center of the arena, a ring of dust and blood that had swallowed countless lives before hers. The crowd roared from every tier of the Colosseum, a symphony of chaos and hunger. They came for the spectacle, not justice. The chains around her wrists clinked softly as she flexed her fingers. They were not ornamental, thick alloy restraints, deliberately heavy. A reminder, a humiliation. But she stood straight. A sharp hiss split the air, and one of the iron gates at the far end groaned open. From the shadows emerged a brute in crimson armor, twice her size, weapon gleaming in the dusklight. The announcer's voice boomed from the speakers above, laced with venomous enthusiasm. Drexer the Cleaver versus Kayla the Untamed. The crowd bellowed. Kayla didn't flinch. Drexer sneered beneath his faceplate and stomped forward, dragging a double-bladed axe that scored deep lines in the sand. "They finally send me a girl to kill," he said, voice distorted through his helmet. "I'll make it quick." Kayla didn't respond. She adjusted her stance, the chains tugging at her arms, forcing her balance slightly forward. Her breathing slowed. She had no armor, no weapon, just instinct. And something else. Something inside her that pulsed colder than fear. Drexer charged. He came like a storm. Heavy, predictable, brutal. His first strike was a downward cleave aimed to split her skull. Kayla sidestepped, pivoted, and the axe sank into the sand with a dull thunk. Before he could recover, she stepped in close, twisted the chain around his forearm, and pulled hard. The move was sudden, precise. He staggered, and she slammed her knee into his side, then wrenched the chain upward, forcing his elbow to crack audibly. The crowd gasped. She let go before he could grab her, retreating just far enough. Blood dripped from his cracked armor, and rage overtook his posture. He charged again, this time faster, sloppier. She ducked the first swing, weaved under the second, and used the momentum of her chained wrists to wrap the links around his neck. Her body coiled behind him, and she pulled, tight. Drexer flailed, but his own strength betrayed him. The more he struggled, the deeper the chain bit. Kayla locked her ankles behind his knees and dragged him backward. He slammed onto the ground with a grunt, face first into the sand. Still, she didn't release. She held him until he stopped moving. Silence fell like ash. Then uproar. The crowd's noise came in waves, some cheering, some jeering. But no one moved. Drexer's body lay motionless as guards swarmed in, halberds raised. Kayla stood before them, breathing steady, arms loose at her sides. The chains shimmered faintly under the arena's harsh lights. The guards didn't step closer. After a tense beat, one motioned for her to be taken back. No acknowledgement. No victory call. No triumphant music. Just the grinding of the cell gate reopening. As she was escorted out, the announcer's voice returned, forced and unsteady. Winner by submission, Kayla the Untamed. She was returned to the underhalls, the maze beneath the arena where sunlight didn't reach. The guards remained silent, but their eyes lingered. She felt them burning into her back, not with lust or contempt, but unease. Her cell was a narrow box of iron and synthetic stone, lined with red lighting strips and reeking of oil and sweat. A cot, a bucket, a tiny screen that only showed static. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her chains still clamped tight. Across from her, in a cell divided by energy bars, another fighter watched with wide eyes. A young man, thin but hard, with scars like calligraphy across his collarbone. "You're not like the others," he said. Kayla didn't look up. "No one here is." "No," he insisted. "You move like something old." She turned her head then, studying him. He flinched under her gaze. "They keep us chained," he continued, voice low. "Even in sleep. Afraid of what we are." "They should be," she said. A long silence followed. In the far corridor, someone screamed, a drawn-out, desperate sound, followed by static buzzing and the metallic snap of containment doors. The arena took someone else. Kayla leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. The memories came like a storm behind her eyelids. A lab, fluorescent lights, voices arguing in clipped tones over data pads. Genetic drift too volatile. Subject Kayla shows cortical development beyond expectation. Terminate project? Then the silence that followed. Not the silence of peace, but of fear. She had not been born. She had been designed. crafted as a last resort, a blend of ancient resilience and futuristic ambition. When the apex predators rose, warriors engineered to dominate every species they encountered. Her creators had panicked. Their perfect weapon had turned against them. So they made her a failsafe, a living countermeasure. But fear has many faces. And when her power became undeniable, her makers locked her away. That had been years ago, maybe decades. The apex predators had taken control of the world's last cities. They ran the entertainment arenas, the genetic labs, the military elite. They ruled with iron and spectacle. And Kayla? They kept her below ground, out of sight, until the crowd demanded new blood. Now something shifted. Not in the arena. In the people. The fighters she passed in the cells, eyes hollow and bruised, began to watch her differently. Not as a curiosity, not as another sacrifice, but as something possible. 2 days later, they brought her out again. The guards said nothing, but she noticed they had reinforced the wrist chains with internal tension coils. Any sharp movement would trigger a feedback pulse. She smiled. This time, there were 3 opponents. Light armor, synchronized weapons, genetically enhanced reflexes. Her handlers wanted a show, and a lesson. They wanted her broken on the sand, not revered. The crowd surged as she stepped out. The moon hung low above the arena walls, swollen and pale. The arena lights flickered for a moment. Just a second, but Kayla noticed. Everything was slowing down. Systems strained under their own corruption. The apex predators were beginning to fracture. Her 3 opponents moved like dancers, flanking her with mechanical grace. Kayla moved like a storm. She waited for the first lunge, then spun, using her chained wrists to trap a weapon arm, kicked another attacker in the solar plexus, and drove both into the third like falling dominoes. She didn't need weapons. She was one. The crowd roared, louder than before. And as the dust settled, something happened no one expected. One of the 3, wounded, helmet cracked, dropped their blade and knelt. Not in defeat. In submission. Kayla looked at them. No gloating. No expression at all. Just acknowledgement. Another followed. 2 blades lay at her feet now. The third, unconscious. She stood between them and the crowd, motionless. And for a breathless moment, the arena held still. Then the lights dimmed. A signal to retreat. She walked back to her cell alone, flanked by guards who no longer held her chains as tightly. Back inside, the thin man across the bars looked at her with reverence. They saw it, he whispered. They all saw it. Kayla sat, pulled the chains into her lap, and ran her fingers along the tension coils. She could feel the pattern of current pulsing beneath the surface. She understood it now. Not just the chains. The system. It was all built the same way. And in it, the cell door opened with a hiss that echoed like a warning, and Kayla stood before the guard spoke. They didn't need to say anything. She already knew. The arena awaited. Again. But this time, they took her somewhere else. Not the blood-stained ring. Not the familiar thunder of the crowd. Instead, she was led through steel corridors that pulsed with silent electricity. She noted the difference immediately. No jeering onlookers. No armed escort with stun rifles drawn. Just silence and walls thicker than any she'd seen before. They were afraid. Not just of her, but of what came next. At the end of the corridor, the door slid open, revealing a long chamber filled with pale light and a bitter, antiseptic tang. A conference room, but colder. Screens lined the walls, slow pulses of data and flickering surveillance feeds. And at its center stood a woman in black. She was tall, angular, with white blonde hair drawn back, so tight it seemed to stretch her face. Her uniform bore no insignia, but Kayla didn't need one to recognize authority. The woman watched her like a surgeon studies a specimen. "You're not what we expected," she said. Kayla remained silent. "I'm Director Voss," the woman continued, "and I've been overseeing your progression for the last several cycles." Progression, a delicate word for violence. "Why am I here?" Kayla asked. Voss smiled slightly. "Because you've become a variable. The apex predators were never meant to kneel. They chose to." They hesitated. Voss corrected. "That's not the same." Kayla stepped forward, the chains brushing the floor. "You didn't bring me here for a philosophy lesson. No, I brought you here for a choice." Voss motioned to the screen behind her. It displayed the outer city, but not the shining upper districts. The lower tiers, where light barely reached and the air shimmered with toxins. Smoke spiraled from collapsed rooftops. Fires burned unchecked in narrow alleys. The image zoomed, revealing Apex soldiers stationed in formation, suppressing unrest with clinical precision. 3 days ago, after your last match, riots started in Sector 7. People began refusing work cycles. Some have gone underground. Others have stolen predator weapons. Kayla's gaze didn't waver. Because of me. Because of the idea of you, Voss said. And ideas are dangerous. A pause. I want you to speak to the leaders of this uprising. Convince them to stand down, or we will erase the entire sector. Kayla's eyes narrowed. You don't want submission. You want control. We want order. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. If they see you turn back, if they see that the untamed bends, they will bend too. It was a gambit, a political maneuver cloaked in desperation. Kayla could feel it, the tremor behind Voss's words, the uncertainty festering in every plan. The system was cracking. Kayla turned toward the screen again. The image shifted, now showing a young woman in tattered robes, standing on a makeshift platform in the slums, speaking to a crowd with a fire in her eyes. Her voice couldn't be heard, but her defiance was clear. Her name is Mira, Voss said. She's the voice of this rebellion. She idolizes you. Kayla stepped closer to the image, studying Myra's face, her stance, so familiar. It was like looking into a fractured mirror, seeing not herself, but what might have been. I'll go, Kayla said. Voss's smile didn't reach her eyes. Good. The journey to Sector 7 was conducted in silence. Kayla was flanked by 2 guards, but they didn't speak. The transport was old, unmarked, flying low over ruined buildings and flickering billboards. As they descended, she saw what the screens hadn't shown. Children playing near crumbling walls, families cooking over open flame, sentries made of scavenged tech and old-world plating. She was not entering a war zone. She was entering a home-turned-battlefield. The moment her feet touched the ground, eyes turned toward her, suspicion, awe, fear. She could feel the weight of their expectations, the brittle hope clinging to her presence like a thread pulled taut. A young man approached, rifle slung across his chest, eyes narrowed. You're really her. Kayla nodded. We were told you'd come to surrender. No, she said. I came to listen. That threw him off balance. He glanced behind, where Mira was emerging from a reinforced shelter, flanked by 2 others. Her face was tired but resolute, streaked with ash and determination. Kayla, she said, stepping forward. I thought you were a ghost. Not a ghost, Kayla replied. Just a prisoner. Until now. The 2 women stared at each other for a long moment. The air between them thickened with unspoken truth. Then Mira turned and beckoned her into the building. Inside, the room was sparse, maps drawn on paper, radio equipment, weapons stripped for parts. But what struck Kayla most was the energy, desperate, driven, focused. We started with 12, Mira said. Now we have 500. Half of them would die for you. Kayla looked around. That's not a compliment. It's a burden, Mira agreed. But we don't have anything else. Your fight gave us one thing we'd lost, dignity. Kayla's voice was quiet. And now they want me to take it from you. Mira gave a bitter laugh. Let me guess. If I surrender, they spare the sector. Kayla nodded. You believe them? No. Then why come? Kayla looked her in the eye. To offer you another way. A silence settled over the room, heavier than the dust. Mira studied her, weighing the sincerity. Say we don't stand down, she said. Say we rise. What then? They'll crush us. They'll try, Kayla said. But something's shifting. Their soldiers hesitated. Their predators are kneeling. They know it's ending. They just don't want to admit it. Mira sat, elbows on the table, fingers steepled. What do you want from me? Time, Kayla said. 3 days. To gather those willing. To strike somewhere they're weak. Make them stumble. The people need proof this can be done. And what if we fail? Kayla didn't hesitate. Then I die fighting. Mira exhaled, deeply. We'll need to move the comm towers. We don't have full coverage past the barricade. The Apex units jam every transmission out of Zone 8. I'll handle the towers, Kayla said. You? I've seen the schematics. I was trained to disrupt them. You were taught to believe I'm unstoppable. Maybe it's time I lived up to that. Outside, the sun dipped behind the haze-choked skyline, casting long shadows across the broken city. Word spread quickly that Kayla had arrived. Not the fighter, not the weapon, but the symbol. By nightfall, families gathered at the edges of the camp, murmuring prayers in dead languages. Children clutched crude figures carved in her image. Kayla sat alone on a rooftop, watching the lights of the apex towers shimmer like false stars. She remembered the arena, the smell of blood, the silence before the first blow. And now, that same silence stretched across the city, not from fear, but from anticipation. A storm was coming, and she was at its eye. The night descended with an oppressive stillness, thick with the tension of what was to come. Kayla moved through the ruins like a phantom, her body wrapped in shadow, her presence nearly undetectable. The chain that had once symbolized her captivity now hung at her side, wrapped around her wrist like a memory she refused to sever. She navigated the old conduit paths beneath Sector 7, where wires snaked like roots through the concrete and the air hummed with buried power. Each step brought her closer to the first comm tower, an obsidian spike looming above the collapsed skyline, humming with surveillance and control. The apex used them to broadcast obedience and silence dissent, saturating the airwaves with commands masked as truths. As Kayla approached the base of the tower, two figures emerged from the shadows, Myra's scouts, lean and quick-eyed. They nodded wordlessly, signaling that the perimeter was clear. She gave a single gesture and slipped inside the tower's maintenance corridor. It was a relic of an older age, its interior marked by rust and decay. The new regime had repurposed it, layering new technology atop crumbling foundations, never bothering to understand what came before. Kayla moved with precise familiarity, disabling motion sensors with a twist of wire, bypassing the biometric locks with tools fashioned from old weapons and broken promises. Her fingers paused on the main relay. One cut, one surge, and the tower would fall silent. But she didn't act immediately. Her mind drifted, back to the arena, to the moment the predators fell to their knees. It hadn't been planned. It hadn't been orchestrated. They had simply stopped, one by one, as if something ancient inside them had awoken, as if the violence had finally torn them open, and all that remained was submission. She flicked the blade. The tower blinked once, then died. The effect was immediate. Across the slums, the apex broadcast stuttered. The propaganda loops faltered. For the first time in years, silence echoed through the city's comm grid. And into that silence, Myra's voice rose, a low, clear frequency pulsing from hand-cranked transmitters and jerry-rigged radios. This is not the end. This is the beginning. Kayla exited the tower without looking back. The following day broke with a jagged edge. Apex patrols surged across Sector 7, searching, interrogating, burning. Drones swept low, scanning faces, calculating risk. Voss had underestimated them. She believed fear would fracture the people. Instead, resistance deepened like roots under fire. Kayla moved from block to block, watching, listening, guiding. She taught Myra's people to move like predators, to strike like ghosts. They hit supply convoys, rerouted energy grids, jammed surveillance signals. Each success lit a spark in the people, small victories stacking like kindling beneath a collapsing regime. But for every victory, there was a cost. On the third night, a child was dragged into the apex square, no older than 10, trembling as the guards announced a new law. Association with traitors meant death. The boy was a message. Kayla arrived seconds too late. They had already pulled the trigger. The crowd didn't scream. They didn't flee. They stood still, silent. Mourning had evolved into something else, resolve. Kayla stepped forward, past the body, past the guards, until she stood beneath the tower where his blood still stained the concrete. She said nothing. And then, slowly, deliberately, she knelt. One by one, others followed. Even the guards hesitated. The image spread faster than any broadcast. A warrior, a legend, bowing not in surrender, but in mourning. A new symbol, carved from sorrow. The regime's attempts at dominance were backfiring with every act of cruelty. Deep within the apex stronghold, Voss watched the footage with a still face and clenched fists. The tide was turning, and she knew it. Her plans, once surgical, now felt like blunt instruments. She summoned the warden. "He's ready," the warden said. "Send him." It was a desperate move, one she'd vowed never to make. But Kayla had become something she couldn't contain with soldiers or orders. She needed a monster. The next morning, the sky changed. A low drone preceded the descent of a black transport, sleek and silent. It didn't land in the upper cities or the command towers. It descended directly into Sector 7, splitting the sky like a blade. From it stepped a figure draped in silver armor unlike any Apex design. Fluted, organic, cruelly elegant. His face was hidden beneath a mask that shimmered with shifting colors, and his movements were too fluid, too quiet. They called him the Arbiter. Kayla recognized him instantly, not as a person, but as a warning. She had heard rumors in the training camps, before the chains, before the arena. Whispers of a being created not for war, but for conclusion. Where soldiers failed, where regimes cracked, he was sent to finish what others couldn't. Not a man, a response. He didn't speak when he arrived. He didn't threaten. He simply moved, fast, silent, and devastating. Within hours, 3 of Myra's outer stations were ash. By nightfall, the scout teams were gone. By dawn, Mira herself had vanished. Kayla knew what had happened. The Arbiter didn't kill unnecessarily. He extracted. He studied. He waited. He wanted her to come to him. She stood now on the edge of the old solar field, where mirrors once reflected light into the sky before the collapse. Now, they lay broken, scattered like bones. And at the center, waiting, stood the Arbiter. He was unarmed. But so was she. Kayla walked forward, each step measured. Her chains were gone now. She had left them behind in the square where the boy had died. She didn't need them to remember who she was. You were made to kneel, the Arbiter said, his voice distorted, hollow. I was made to survive. No, he said. You were made to obey. You just refused. Then we're alike. He tilted his head. I never refused. I perfected. She could see it in his stance, in the way he didn't settle into a guard position, but rather seemed to anticipate every move she hadn't yet made. He had studied her. He had watched her in the arena, in the riots, in the silence. He moved first. The fight was not a flurry of motion, but a storm compressed to a heartbeat. They struck and countered, not as two combatants, but as mirrors. Every move she made, he answered. Every feint, he read. It wasn't just skill. It was intimacy. He knew her. And still, she pressed forward. Their battle tore through the field, shattering mirrors, sending light fracturing in every direction. Each reflection held a piece of them. Kayla's fury, the Arbiter's precision. Dust swirled. Blood sprayed. Then silence. They stood across from each other, breathing hard. You're not fighting to win, he said. I'm fighting so others don't have to. He paused. And in that pause, she saw it, a hesitation. A flicker of something behind the mask. She struck. A final blow, not to kill, but to shatter. Her fist hit his mask, cracking it down the center. He staggered, hands raised, not in defense, but in confusion. From within the broken mask, Kayla saw not a monster, but a face, young, uncertain. A man who had once believed in order, but had never been given the chance to choose. She stepped back. Now you decide, she said. The Arbiter didn't follow as she turned away. And behind her, for the first time, he knelt. The city was quieter than Kayla had ever known it. Not with peace, but with breath held, an entire population suspended between collapse and revolution. Smoke still curled from the edges of the upper sectors, but the people of Sector 7 walked with their heads lifted, not because the battle was over, but because the idea of winning no longer seemed impossible. Word of the Arbiter's kneeling spread faster than any transmission. Even Mira, wounded and stitched up in a darkened infirmary, laughed when she heard it. Her ribs cracked with pain, but her eyes gleamed. They trained him to end you, she said, and you turned him into a witness. Kayla didn't answer. She stood at the threshold of the broken chapel they'd converted into a war room, watching the clouds as they slid past the charred spires. The storm hadn't broken yet, but its edge was visible now, lightning flashing in the distance like gods reshuffling their order. She should have felt triumphant. But something inside her had shifted when the Arbiter dropped to his knees. Not just because he had spared her, but because she'd seen the same uncertainty in his eyes that had once lived in hers. And uncertainty, once birthed, never stayed silent. Voss would not wait long. When the final transmission came, it didn't begin with threats or ultimatums. It was quiet. A single tone. Then her voice. You have 36 hours. Kayla stood in the ruined square with Mira and the remaining captains, the rusting remnants of Apex propaganda posters fluttering on broken walls. The message repeated. We offer clemency for those who lay down arms. For Kayla, no such offer exists. No one moved. No one spoke. They all turned to her. I'm not asking you to protect me, she said. I'm asking you to finish what we started. Mira leaned on her staff, blood still seeping beneath the bandages on her arm. You think if you go to them, it'll stop the purge? Kayla shook her head. I think if I don't, they'll use me as an excuse to wipe everything clean. A young captain, Tess, barely 19, stepped forward. They'll kill you. They've already tried, Kayla said, managing a thin smile. A plan formed not in war rooms, but across whispered conversations, across rooftops and sewer tunnels. Mira would lead the second wave, striking the apex data vaults beneath the city, exposing the records of experimentation, the buried truths about the arena, the predators, and Kayla herself. The rebels had names now. Evidence. Proof. And Kayla would be the distraction. She moved through the shattered streets alone at sunrise, carrying no weapon, wrapped in a cloak woven from the threads of her own past, prisoner garb, stitched with rebel cloth, marked by the white sigil of Myra's movement, a kneeling warrior crowned in flame. She arrived at Apex Central as the gates opened not from fear, but from anticipation. Voss stood at the top of the marble stairs, guards behind her, the wind stirring her coat. For a moment, it was as if nothing had changed, two figures, separated by conviction and history. You came, Voss said. You called, Kayla replied. Voss didn't descend the stairs. You've become a myth, Kayla. That makes you dangerous. Not because you fight, but because people believe you can't be broken. Kayla's voice was calm. Maybe I already was. But I'm still standing. Behind her, unseen but felt, the people of Sector 7 moved like tidewater, spreading beneath the surface. Myra's voice returned to the airwaves, this time not in secret, but over hijacked Apex satellites. Footage of the Arbiter kneeling played across every screen in the upper city. Testimonies of the captured predators echoed from tower to tower. Your system feeds on silence, Kayla said, stepping forward. So we became loud. Voss studied her, the way one might study a fire spreading through a map. Calculated, clinical, and afraid. You're not here to die, Voss said. You're here to make me choose. Kayla stopped 2 steps below her. No, you already made your choice. I'm here so everyone can see what it looks like. Something shifted in the air. A ripple. A crack. Then the detonation from below. Mira had breached the vaults. Voss turned sharply, fury overtaking precision. You think this ends with a data leak? No, Kayla said. It ends when enough people stop obeying. Sirens wailed. In the distance, Apex patrols faltered. Screens began displaying documents in real time. Experiments on children, records of fabricated enemies, data on obedience implants hidden in the predator's neural spines. Truth laid bare. It didn't just fracture control. It disintegrated the idea of it. The guards behind Voss faltered. And for the first time, Kayla saw it. Doubt. She took the final step. You had power, she said. And you spent it trying to keep people on their knees. I was made in your image, but I learned to stand. Voss pulled a sidearm, not out of strategy, but desperation. Her hand trembled. Kayla didn't flinch. Around them, crowds emerged from the shadows. Citizens, rebels, former slaves. The Apex elite watched from their high windows as the illusion unraveled. Voss's eyes flickered from Kayla to the encroaching crowd. You won't pull that trigger, Kayla said quietly. Not because you've grown a conscience, but because you know what comes after. The silence roared. Voss let the weapon fall. And in that moment, the regime ended. Not with a coup or an explosion, but with surrender. Public, visible, undeniable. Kayla turned to the crowd. Not to bask in victory, but to witness them witnessing her. There was no cheer, no anthem, just the slow, soundless raising of hands, one by one, as if lifting the weight that had been pressed down on their backs for too long. It would take time to rebuild, to redefine. But Kayla had never been meant to lead. She had been meant to endure. Now, she had become something more. Not a symbol, not a weapon, but the beginning.